Welcome to Nursing Insights, the podcast where we explore the fascinating connections between microorganisms and human health. I'm Shaniki Barrett.
And I'm Kimberly Taylor, and today we'll be diving into some groundbreaking research about stomach bacteria and brain health. We'll be talking about Helicobacter pylori and its potential link to neurodegenerative diseases.
Joining us today are our colleagues Carly Cole, Chantoy Eldemer, and Sherman Walker, who helped research this topic. Let's dive right in.
Now, Carly, tell us, what is Helicobacter pylori?
Helicobacter pylori is a spiral-shaped bacterium. It affects half of the world's population. It is mostly known for causing peptic ulcers and also stomach cancer. However, researchers recently have shown that it may also affect our brain and our nervous system.
So you're telling us that it affects half of the world, the entire population of the world. Okay.
So Charmaine, how common is H. pylori, especially in our region?
It's very common in the Caribbean. Hygiene and living conditions play a big role, so as nurses we will see many cases.
And tell us now, Chantal, how can a stomach infection possibly affect other parts of the body?
Stomach infections can affect parts of the body. Even though H. pylori is in the stomach, it may influence other body systems. Some studies suggest that it can affect the brain.
That's really big because Okay, so Carly, what role does the gut-brain relationship play in this discussion?
So both the gut and the brain, they communicate with each other. So you know that any disruptions in the stomach may potentially affect our brain function.
That's true.
And Chantal, what have researchers found out about H. pylori and brain disorders like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease?
Some research show that people with these disorders sometimes also have H. pylori, but we cannot say the bacteria actually causes it. It is a possible link that needs to be studied.
Okay.
And Carly, can we say that H. pylori causes these conditions?
I would say no, the evidence is not strong enough. It's more like an association at this point.
And Charmaine, what would you tell us that findings in research seem to be consistent so far?
Many studies agree H. pylori affects overall health, which could indirectly influence the nervous system.
Okay. And another question for you, Charmaine. Where do researchers disagree as it regards to this?
Okay, results vary. Some studies have shown strong connections while others have little to none.
And Chantal, why are there so many differences in study results?
There are many differences studying the results because there are many factors that affect their lifestyle, genetics, and study methods affect research outcomes. So that's why we're seeing so many different thoughts and assumptions on the connection.
Interesting.
And we know that genetics is all about DNA.
Yes.
So Chantal, another question for you. Why is this research important for healthcare?
The research is important because if there is a connection, treating H. pylori could have benefits beyond stomach health, but more research is needed. So it's good for us to get this research done so we know exactly what's taking place.
And many of us would want to know, Charmaine, what could this mean from a public health perspective?
Okay, treating and preventing Helicobacter pylori is already important. Any additional benefits would make it even more valuable.
Okay.
Okay, and a question for you, Carly. What should nursing students remember about this topic?
But I'd say the gut and the brain may be more connected than we even realize.
That's true.
Charmaine, what is one important caution to take when looking at these findings?
Okay, alright. Just because two things are linked does not mean that one cause the other.
Okay. So relation basically doesn't mean causation.
Right.
And last question for you now, Shantoy. And how should us nursing students handle emerging research such as this one?
What we need to do, we need to stay updated, always follow proven guidelines when treating patients, and just continue to be updated on the new findings and researches that we are provided to us.
Alright, thank you guys so much. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you to Carly, Shantoy, and Charmaine for sharing their research and insights. Remember, good nursing means being caring and using reliable knowledge. Keep learning, stay curious, and care for patients as a whole. Thank you. Our AI research topic is H. pylori linked to neurodegenerative disease risk. The objective for this presentation is to define Helicobacter pylori, describe how H. pylori may be linked to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, identify how H. pylori is transmitted, outline how the infection can impact the brain through the gut-brain connection, describe the bacterium's replication and structure, list the main tests used to detect the bacterium, show the prevalence of H. pylori globally and in the Caribbean, compare the consistent and inconsistent findings in current research, recommendation for further research where needed, and explanation of how AI was used in completing research. So what is H. pylori? In this research, the focus will be made on the link of Helicobacter pylori to neurodegenerative disease risk, such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. The bacteria H. pylori is a known microbe that causes stomach infections, but with recent research, it is showing as a link to neurodegenerative diseases. So what actually is H. pylori? Helicobacter pylori is a spiral-shaped bacterium that lives in the stomach lining. It affects about half of the world's population and is best known to cause peptic ulcers and stomach cancer. However, recent research has suggested that it now causes neurodegenerative diseases. How the connection works? It works through chronic inflammation, nutrient deficiencies, and toxic proteins. The gut, the brain-gut or gut-to-brain connection. So some scientists have discovered that H. pylori may increase the risk of neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, which is memory loss, and Parkinson's disease, which includes movement or tremor problems. Mode of transition. H. pylori. Mode of transition. H. pylori is primarily spread through direct person-to-person contact and environmental sources. Some other key transmission routes are fecal-oral route, which an infected stool might get in contact orally on your mouth. We have oral-oral, which can be spread through kissing or any indirect or any other direct activities. And we have gastric oral route, which can be transmitted through vomiting. Transmission linked to neurodegenerative disease risk. So, as it relates to the link of neurodegenerative disease risk to H. pylori, it is not due to direct person-to-person spread, but persistent. And there are several mechanisms in which this microorganism can be spread. We have the gut-brain axis, and this is the bidirectional communication system linking with the central nervous system by the byproducts interacting with the gut-brain axis. Then we have the systemic inflammation. Chronic H. pylori infection in the stomach leads to persistent systemic inflammation, and they release pro-inflammatory or cytokines into the bloodstream. Then we have direct access to the central nervous system. The bacteria, their toxins, or infected immune cells can potentially compromise the blood-brain barrier or travel along neural pathways. Then we have nutrient deficiency. H. pylori infection can impair the absorption of essential nutrients like vitamin B12 and folate, which can lead to elevated homocysteine levels. Lastly, we have molecular mimicry. The immune response generated against H. pylori may mistakenly target similar proteins and cause molecular mimicry.
Okay, so we're now going to look at the method of replication. So H. pylori replication involves typical bacterial processes, but with unique adaptations for its niche. So one of them is binary fission. So H. pylori primarily replicates asexually through binary fission. H. pylori primarily replicates asexually through binary fission. So you know that's where you have one cell splitting into two daughter cells, and you have 2 into 4, 4 into 8, and it continues, yeah? We have intracellular replication. Now studies have shown that H. pylori can invade and multiply inside gastric epithelial cells and macrophages using the host cells' autophagic vesicles as a replication niche. We have the coccyte form. Now this one is very interesting because we know that H. pylori is spiral shaped, but how now does it become a coccyte form? Now in this case, it transforms. It transforms into a coccyte form where, of course, it will operate only under harsh conditions. When I talk about harsh conditions, I'm talking about high oxygen levels, low pH level where you have acid stress. And of course, another thing is it's dormant at this stage. Yes, it is alive, but it is not active, right? So that is the coccyte form. Now the morphology. H. pylori is a distinctively shaped bacterium. It is a gram-negative spiral shaped or S-shaped, spherical shaped rod. It typically measures about 0.5 micrometers in diameter and 3 micrometers long. Now a key feature is a bundle of 4 to 7 sheets polar flagella at one end, which provides the motility necessary to swim through the viscous mucus layer of the stomach.
These are pictures.
So this is one of the photos which is showing a microscopic view of the H. pylori. And this is also another one.
And now we'll have a look at bacterial identification. There are 4 main ways to test for H. pylori infection. These ways are breath test, stool test, blood test, endoscopy, and biopsy. The H. pylori breath test is most common for H. pylori infection and also the most accurate and non-invasive test. The H. pylori stool antigen test detects antigen associated with H. pylori in the stool. Antigen are markers that allow the immune system, the body's infection fighting system, to identify germs. Having H. pylori antigen in the stool means that the bacteria is in the digestive tract. A blood test, on the other hand, is simple, but it can only show that H. pylori was previously in the body. An upper endoscopy is the most accurate test for H. pylori, but unlike the others, it is a bit more invasive. Now we'll have a look at the worldwide numbers in the Caribbean. Studies have shown that H. pylori infection and an increased risk of Studies have shown that H. pylori infection and an increased risk of neurodegenerative diseases globally with the Latin American and Caribbean region having one of the highest prevalence rates, estimated at about 59%. The prevalence in the Caribbean region has a high background of prevalence of H. pylori infection, which is a major public health concern, primarily due to its association with gastrointestinal issues such as gastritis, peptic ulcers, and gastric cancer. The overall prevalence shows that in Latin America and the Caribbean at 59%, other estimates for the Latin American region in adults range from 57.57% to 69.26%. Specific country data shows that in Turks and Caicos Islands and the Bahamas, the prevalence is a range of 42% to 57.8%, respectively.
Alright, so we'll now look at the adequate research that H. pylori causes neurodegenerative diseases. So our current research, it indicates there's a strong association and a potential causal mechanism between H. pylori infection and increased risk of neurodegenerative diseases. There is not really a consensus to say yes, it does indeed causes that. So for now, what we would have found is that it requires additional studies that are more in detail so that there is a better understanding whether or not it does cause the disease. But for
Reflection and value of study. Clinical implications could lead to new prevention strategies for dementia. Also, simple antibiotic treatment for H. pylori might reduce neurodegenerative disease risk. It also helps identify at-risk patients earlier. In the public health sector, H. pylori is treatable and also preventable. Understanding this link could reduce the global burden of dementia. It's also cost-effective intervention compared to treating advanced neurological diseases. In nursing practices, nurses can educate patients about the importance of treating H. pylori infections. Better understanding of how digestive health affects brain health and also holistic patient assessments becomes more important. Okay, consistency versus inconsistency in the research. Consistent findings, what researchers agree on. H. pylori infection is associated with vitamin B12 deficiency, which affects neurological health. The bacterium causes chronic inflammation that can have systematic effects. Also, people with H. pylori show higher levels of inflammatory markers in their blood. Some studies consistently show higher rates of H. pylori in patients with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. Okay. Inconsistent findings, where researchers disagree, causation versus correlation. Does H. pylori cause these diseases, or do people neurological diseases just happen to have more H. pylori? Okay, mixed study results. Some studies find strong associations, others find there are no associations. Geographic variations, the link appears stronger in some populations than others. Timing questions. Unclear whether infection needs to be present for years, decades to increase risk. Why the inconsistency exists? There are study design differences, small sample sizes, confounding factors such as diet, genetics, and lifestyle, detection methods, and also long disease timeline.
Recommendation for further study and the reason why. So while numerous studies point to a strong link and plausible biological pathways, observational studies alone cannot fully establish a direct cause and effective relationship of H. pylori infection to causing neurodegenerative diseases. The evidence currently indicates that H. pylori infection is a significant contributing or triggering factor with a complex interplay genetic, environmental, and lifestyle elements. What we recommend is that there can be future large-scale, well-controlled longitudinal studies and randomized controlled trials needed to clarify the precise role of H. pylori in the onset and progression of this disease for the degenerative diseases such as Parkinson's and dementia.